Next on the news, pro-life leaders say false positive blood tests could result in the abortion of unborn children.
They're telling me that there's no other option because he's going to die anyway.
A mother forced to make an agonizing decision, and she chose life. Her son is now 16. A rally in the Bronx demanding accountability and better safety measures after Sunday's high-rise fire that killed 17 people, including 8 children. Cardinal Timothy Dolan visits the New Haven parish of Blessed Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus. Plus,
he was a good man. He really was. Everybody loved him.
A letter from heaven written by a World War II soldier is finally delivered 76 years later. I'm Christine Persichetti. Currents News starts right now. Pro-life leaders call it deeply disturbing. An investigation that found some prenatal blood tests have alarmingly high false positives for genetic disorders that could lead to the abortion of unborn children. Jessica Easthope has more, including the story of a mother who chose life.
This is Shane Gleason on the day of his grammar school graduation. His mom, Debbie, still thinks back in horror to the first thing her doctor said about him.
To this day, I don't believe in abortion, but they're telling me there's no other option because he's going to die anyway.
Debbie was told without a doubt Shane would have trisomy 13, a rare genetic disorder that causes severe intellectual and physical disabilities, that he wouldn't live beyond a week.
They said, but what about your daughter? You know, that's not fair to her to bring her brother into her life, and then a week later, he's dead.
But Debbie's case isn't rare. An analysis done by the New York Times of non-invasive prenatal tests shows they're wrong 85% of the time.
As your risk of carrying a baby with Down syndrome goes down, your chance of actually getting a false positive goes up. And that's the data that they're not really presenting.
Dr. Tara Sander-Lee, the director of life sciences at the Charlotte Lozier Institute, says every day thousands of women across the globe get these false results, prompting them to seek out an abortion.
If I were to listen to them because of a test to end his life, a test that wasn't even true.
If the test is positive, they are often pressured to abort this child.
She calls this a modern form of eugenics.
This is a whole nother layer to the abortion industry that is deceptive, that wants to get rid of people that look and act differently than we do.
The tests are screenings, not a diagnosis. In Iceland, close to 100% of women who get positive results for Down syndrome terminate their pregnancies.
They made it seem like he wasn't even a human.
Currently, more than a dozen states prohibit discrimination abortions based on prenatal screenings. New York is not one of them. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
For more information on how a baby develops and the chances of a false positive during prenatal testing, you can visit the Charlotte Lozier Institute website at lozierinstitute.org/voyage. Next week, the nation's pro-life fight goes to Washington, D.C. as the March for Life continues on despite Omicron. Participants planning to join in on the January 21st rally on the National Mall should still expect to wear face masks and comply with COVID regulations. Last year's march was virtual because of the pandemic and the violence on January 6th. While the March for Life never releases projected attendance figures, experts estimate this year's event could reach pre-pandemic levels. The Diocese of Brooklyn is offering a way to get you to the march if you want to go. The round-trip bus will leave the diocesan office, that's at 310 Prospect Park West in Brooklyn, at 6:30 a.m. You are required to wear a mask for the entire ride to D.C. and back. Each seat costs $25, so grab your tickets now. Just contact Martha Hernandez at 718-281-9540 or email mhernandez@diobrook.org by January 17th. And stay tuned to Currents News and the Tablet as we provide full coverage of the January 21st march. The national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, John Lavenberg, will be on the ground there to give us a full report. Queens Parish is getting into the pro-life spirit ahead of the march. Holy Family Church in Fresh Meadows is asking people to donate a rose for life. The $5 cost of the rose is going to help Bridge to Life, a pro-life organization in Flushing, Queens, that looks to help pregnant women and new moms get the essentials in the hopes that they will choose life and keep their babies. The roses donated will adorn the church's sanctuary during the parish's day of prayer and fasting on January 21st. So if you'd like to donate a rose for life, just contact the rectory at 718-969-2448. Bishops in New Jersey expressed their profound disappointment over the passing of a new abortion bill. The legislation codifies the right to an abortion in the state. The bill also places no limit on when someone can get an abortion, making it legal throughout pregnancy. So far, New Jersey lawmakers have voted to pass the bill, and it is waiting on Governor Phil Murphy's desk for his signature. The governor has said he will sign it. After the bill's passing, the bishops said in a joint statement, "We have failed as a society when a response to any pregnancy is fear rather than joy. We must do better. Therefore, we urge all Catholics and people of goodwill to actively participate in breaking down the economic, employment, social, racial, and emotional barriers that lead mothers into thinking abortion is a better option than life." COVID hospitalizations are at a record high, pushing some hospitals and ICUs to the brink, including Coney Island Hospital and others all across the country. Now the Biden administration is sending help to hospitals struggling to keep up with this latest surge. Daryl Forges has a closer look at the promised relief.
With COVID hospitalizations at record highs, President Biden is sending much-needed help to states struggling to keep up. On Thursday, the president announcing he's deploying military medical teams to 6 states: Ohio, New York, Michigan, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and New Mexico.
They're part of a major deployment of our nation's armed forces to help hospitals across the country manage this surge of the Omicron virus.
The president also says the government is purchasing 500 million additional COVID-19 tests. Another critical issue the president addressed: masks.
I know that for some Americans, the mask is not always affordable or convenient to get. So, next week we'll announce how we are making high-quality masks available to the American people for free.
It's a huge relief for hospitals stretched thin as healthcare staffing shortages strain healthcare systems across the country. According to the Department of Health and Human Services, hospitalizations are currently over 155,000.
We have over 300 people out right now for all reasons, but a lot of them are out due to COVID or because of pandemic-related concerns.
More than a dozen states reporting they have less than 15% of ICU beds left.
I am unable to care for the patients that we need to. I had 3 nurses leave because they can't do this again. They feel like we're going backwards.
Daryl Forges, Currents News.
The Supreme Court on Thursday blocked a nationwide vaccine mandate and testing at large businesses. The Biden administration wanted employees at businesses with over 100 workers to be vaccinated or undergo weekly testing. The court's conservative majority concluded the administration overstepped its authority. The MTA is getting over $6 billion in COVID relief money. Senator Chuck Schumer made the announcement along with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. The money was requested by city officials to help close funding gaps created by the pandemic. Ridership in the city dropped dramatically when COVID hit. The relief dollars will be used to prevent fare hikes, layoffs, and service cuts for now. The victims of that apartment fire in the Bronx are beginning to be laid to rest. 2 of the youngest children to die in the fire, a 5- and a 12-year-old, had their funerals at a Harlem mosque Wednesday. The children lived next door to the second-floor apartment where the flames broke out. Burial plans are still being made for the remaining 15 victims. Some are trying to decide if the funerals will happen here or in their native Gambia. Meanwhile, community leaders and neighbors are rallying for justice. They were outside the Twin Parks Northwest building, demanding answers and change, saying fires like this one are happening all too often in the Bronx. One safety measure that the city had put in place after other fires was the self-closing doors, but they reportedly failed during this fire. President Biden is continuing his push to get voting legislation passed in Congress. The commander-in-chief meeting with Democratic senators behind closed doors Thursday to discuss the legislation. Democrats face an uphill battle amid Republican opposition and resistance within their ranks to changing Senate rules. Thursday morning, the House of Representatives approved a measure that combined key provisions from two voting bills, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. It will then move on to the Senate. So if they do get passed, what does this mean for you? We break down both bills to see exactly what's inside of them. Voting rights front and center on Capitol Hill with two bills President Joe Biden is pushing.
I'm tired of being quiet.
The Freedom to Vote Act looks to make it easier to vote. Election day would be a public holiday. You could register the same day as an election. There's a guarantee you could vote by mail, and people with past felony convictions would be able to vote in federal elections again. It would also limit changes to congressional voting districts and keep track of money given to groups looking to influence elections. The second bill is focused on bolstering the 1965 Voting Rights Act, forbidding racial discrimination in voting, quietly brokered between President Lyndon B. Johnson, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and other civil rights leaders. In fact, the new bill is named after a civil rights icon, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which looks to regulate voting rule changes and redistricting in states with a history of voting rights violations. The previous requirements were struck down by the Supreme Court in 2013. For Democrats, the bills push back against new voting laws around the country that limit access to voting. But Republicans say it's federal overreach. Getting these bills through the House is one thing, but advancing them in the gridlocked Senate isn't likely, even if there's a push by Democrats to change the rules to make it happen. And all of it expected to take days to play out. Senator Chuck Schumer sent a letter to his Democratic colleagues saying he'll force a procedural vote on the two bills and that once they're filibustered, because no Republicans support them, they will need to change the Senate rules on filibusters. But not all Democrats are on board with that. The Senate has passed a bipartisan bill to posthumously award the Congressional Gold Medal to Emmett Till. The 14-year-old black teen from Chicago was visiting family in Mississippi in 1955 when he was accused of propositioning a white woman. He was brutally murdered by white supremacists. The recognition comes more than a month after the Justice Department officially closed its investigation into the infamous killing. New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan visited the first parish assignment of Blessed Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus. His Eminence pointing out that it was his work at St. Mary's Parish in New Haven, Connecticut, that would lead Father McGivney to form the fraternal organization.
He was an exemplary, zealous, faithful, loving parish priest. And one of his apostolates, when he saw his men in need, and especially when his men would die at dangerous jobs, the widows and orphans not having any way to continue to go on, he founded the renowned Knights of Columbus.
Cardinal Dolan says during his visit, he was able to pray at Father McGivney's tomb and offer Mass. There's a lot more news headed your way. Inflation is hitting Americans hard, but just how much more are you paying for the basics? Some shocking numbers, especially at the supermarket. For Christians in Egypt, a long-awaited law on their personal legal status could soon be approved. And later, what do the Pope and Elvis have in common? The answer may surprise you. You've probably noticed lately you've been paying more for, well, just about everything. Inflation is hitting Americans hard, and it's having a major impact on everything, especially at the supermarket. Vanessa Yurkovich has more.
Despite a cold December, inflation was red hot. Consumer prices grew at the fastest annual pace since 1982, 7% year over year, and up 0.5% last month.
Who can budget? You just have to pay the price.
Americans, on average, paying about $250 more for the same things they were buying a year ago. Gas topping the charts, up nearly 50% from a year ago. Same for furniture, up just over 17%, and food up 6.3%.
What I used to buy, let's say last year, that would cost me around $50 in groceries, almost doubles right now.
And at the pump, prices soared to over $4 a gallon in some states, prompting President Biden to release 50 million barrels of oil from the nation's Strategic Petroleum Reserve in November. And the higher prices are even scaring some drivers away. Tommy Hondros owns this gas station in Lower Manhattan and says he used to have a line of cars.
150. Look how many I have now. Nothing. One. It's insane.
Used car sales rose by 37% year over year as there were less new cars coming to market.
Port shutdown created shortages of all kinds of things, from vehicles to lumber to clothing, and that caused prices to rise.
And that trickled down to the cost of food. Groceries rose by 6.5%. But for restaurants already struggling with labor shortages and a new Omicron variant, taking on another battle of high food prices has been challenging.
Halibut one week is $14 and the next week it's $24, or now it's $28. So that's the most dramatic.
That was Vanessa Yurkovich reporting. Another key measure of inflation has now hit a record high. The U.S. Producer Price Index, which tracks what producers get paid for goods and services, rose 9.7% last year. That's the biggest increase since the data set began in 2010. Canada may be considering a plan to tax the unvaccinated. It's an idea that some have floated here in the U.S. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is reviewing a proposal out of Quebec, but he's not yet ready to endorse it. Travis Dararche has more.
For people who continue to hesitate or to choose not to get vaccinated, they are losing privileges.
The Prime Minister today forceful once again. Pressure will continue to build on those that haven't gotten the shot. Justin Trudeau not ruling out an idea floated by Quebec's Premier to tax the unvaccinated.
This Quebec proposal is something that obviously everyone is paying attention to right now, but there are still many details to know, and the details will be important in how this works.
Details of the proposed fee or tax are unclear right now, but even the idea is causing some civil liberties groups and ethicists concern.
I think punitive and intended to be a way to compel people to be vaccinated. I've heard lots of public health experts talk about the need to kind of build trust and meet people where they are.
It's ethically problematic. I mean, what would make it more ethical is if the vaccines were an absolute firewall. If a person was vaccinated, they were not going to transmit it and they were not going to occupy an ICU bed, but that's not the case.
Still, hospitalizations in Quebec continue to rise. Nearly 3,000 with 263 in intensive care, most unvaccinated. Over 85% of the population has at least one shot, but there are legal questions about implementing a financial penalty to get that number up even further.
I think the first one is whether it would violate the charter. And if a province were to enact a vaccine mandate, that would immediately trigger Section 7 of the charter.
The Prime Minister would not say if he would look at the possibility of implementing a similar policy federally, and so far no other province has come out in support of Quebec's proposal.
That was Travis Dararche reporting. Several countries, including Austria and Greece, have already imposed cash penalties on those who refuse a vaccine. A long-awaited law on the personal legal status of Christians in Egypt is expected to be approved soon. The country's parliament is now working with Christians to draft a new piece of legislation for their upcoming session, addressing family laws for Christians in the Muslim-dominated country. Out of Egypt's population of 87 million, Christians only make up 10%, with Coptic Christians being the majority. Still to come on Currents News.
He was a good man. He really was. Everybody loved him.
A letter from heaven written by a World War II soldier is finally delivered 76 years later. The heartfelt message to his mom. Plus, Pope Francis stopped at a Rome record store earlier this week, which got us thinking, what's in his music collection? We have the answer. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back.
The mailman came and he said, was your husband in the service? And I said, yes, he was.
It was a hello from heaven. A young soldier's letter home dating back to World War II has now made its way to his family decades later. That letter was from a soldier serving overseas to his mother, and now, 76 years later, his message was finally delivered to his widow in Woburn, Massachusetts. As Christine McCarthy reports, this very special delivery is now a cherished treasure.
That's the address and everything. Imagine that. 76 years.
Angelina Gonzalez didn't even know this letter existed.
I couldn't believe it, and then just his handwriting and everything, you know, it was just so amazing.
On December 6, 1945, months after World War II ended, a 22-year-old Army sergeant she had yet to meet penned a note to his mother in Woburn while he was overseas in Germany.
It says, "Dear Mom, received another letter from you today and was happy to hear that everything is okay. As for myself, I'm fine and getting along okay. But as far as the food, it's pretty lousy."
That letter was lost in the mail, long forgotten, until late last year when it suddenly and inexplicably showed up in a Pittsburgh Postal Service facility. John had died 6 years before, his mom long gone, so it would be delivered to his next of kin, the bride he left behind.
The mailman came and he said, was your husband in the service? And I said, yes, he was. And he said, well, I think I have a letter for you. And I said, really?
After the war, Angelina and John married and settled in Woburn. They raised 5 children and were happily married for 61 years.
He was a good man. He really was. Everybody loved him.
Angelina, who turns 90 this month, finds comfort reading these sweet words from a brave son to his worried mother.
At the end, he said, love and kisses, your son, Johnny. I'll be seeing you soon, I hope, which I thought was wonderful.
A letter from the past, the best present that could be delivered.
It's like he came back to me, you know, really. That was amazing.
Brought tears to my eyes. That was Christine McCarthy reporting. Along with the handwritten letter was a note from the USPS employee explaining, we are uncertain where this letter has been for the past 7+ decades, but it arrived at our facility approximately 6 weeks ago. Due to the age and significance to your family history, delivering this letter was of utmost importance to us. Well, the Pope likes the King. Remember on Wednesday we reported about Pope Francis making a surprise visit to a record shop in Rome? Well, for some, it was no surprise. At the Vatican, His Holiness actually has a huge collection of nearly 2,000 CDs and about 19 albums. That's according to the Cardinal who's in charge of curating the library. And he says that while the Pope's personal collection is mostly made up of classical music, it also includes an old album of Edith Piaf's greatest hits, Argentine tango tunes, in particular those composed by Astor Piazzolla, and a 25-disc collection of gospel music by Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. Learn something new every day. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.